So we're going to continue to discuss the impact of the fall of the Han Dynasty on China in this lesson today. For your do now, you're to read a short reading and answer 2 multiple choice questions. The reading is as follows. The teachings of Confucianism. The goal of Confucianism was a just and peaceful society. Confucius taught that society worked well when all people acted properly based upon their roles and their relationships with others. According to Confucianism, there are 5 basic relationships: ruler and subject, husband and wife, father and son, older sibling and younger sibling, and friend and friend. All people must respect and obey those above them. In particular, they must respect their elders. In return, those with authority, such as rulers, fathers, husbands, and older siblings, must set a good example. They should be kind, honest, wise, and faithful. Confucius taught, "Do not do to others what you would not want done to you." So, you're going to read the 2 multiple choice questions. The first is, what was the major focus in Confucianism? And the second is, what did Confucius believe people with authority needed to do? So go ahead and pause the video at this time and complete your do now. So now that we've reviewed our Confucian philosophy that we see is very prevalent in the Han Dynasty and pretty much right after the fall, let's take a step back to our second unit where we discussed world religions. Right, we're particularly going to be focusing on Buddhism today. So let's read document X, and I'll refresh your memory as we go through the lesson on the different ideas found in Buddhism. Document X. By the time Buddhism reached China, the civilization was very old and had almost 1,000 years of traditions. The Chinese also believed they were the only truly civilized society in the world. Therefore, Buddhism had to compete with the original Chinese philosophies to win the hearts of the Chinese. Luckily, the chaos of the Han Dynasty made many people disillusioned with the existing philosophical systems. Many Chinese people saw greed tear apart their communities, in spite of their long-held beliefs like Confucianism. Therefore, Buddhism began to look more and more attractive as a guide for life. So, we're seeing here this chaos because the Han Dynasty is falling, and we know that there's a lot of issues surrounding the fall of the Han Dynasty. We see political corruption, rebellions, invasions, and economic issues. And in times like this, where there's a lot of chaos, people tend to evaluate what is happening in their culture and try to decide what's working really well and what isn't. This is something that's probably pretty familiar to all of us at this point with everything happening in the world today. We're seeing things in our society that really haven't worked for a while, and now they're coming up to the forefront and they need some attention. A lot of people are having this discussion currently about how we handle like the medical field and how people are treated inside of hospitals and how hospitals work. Right? That's something in modern day with what's happening currently that we can see that people really do this throughout history, that people take times of chaos and uncertainty and they try to analyze and see what's working in their culture and what is not. Often they see chaos as signs of systems that are just not working, and people tend to look for ways to replace these broken systems or issues and make sure that their society can run the best that it can. In China, after the fall of the Han Dynasty, we see this examination of culture and how it's opening up the door to this faith of Buddhism. All right, so I want you to pause the video and take this time to answer the question, why do some people become Buddhist? Meaning, at this time in the Han Dynasty, or right after the fall of the Han Dynasty rather, why are some people in China starting to turn to Buddhism based off of this text? So go ahead and pause your video and complete that question. All right, and just a little bit of a reminder with the spread of Buddhism. Right, the first evidence for Buddhism that we see in China was during the Han Dynasty when Emperor Ming created a Buddhist temple. That's done in around 78 CE. So Buddhism doesn't come on the scene like after the fall. It comes a little bit before the fall. All right, We also see that Buddhist monks are translating Buddhist texts from Sanskrit, or the language of ancient India, into Chinese around 200 CE. So we're seeing a pretty large chunk of time where Buddhism is present, but it's not the main religion or philosophy that's being practiced in China until after the fall of the Han Dynasty. Further, if we take a look at this map of the spread of Buddhism, we know that it starts in India, right? We've talked about that at length before, but we also know it doesn't just stay there, right? It spreads throughout Asia, including places like Tibet, Burma, China, Korea, and Japan, right? It spreads throughout this huge continent, and there's a reason for that. And we're going to look at a few documents today to see what makes the teachings of Buddhism so attractive to people, especially in these times of chaos when they are trying to evaluate what's working in their cultures and what is not. So as we continue working through this, I want you to keep in mind these couple of questions that you'll see on the slide. How does Buddhism start to really move into China? And what people do you think start to help Buddhism move into China? Was this primarily before or after the fall of the Han Dynasty? Try to keep these questions in mind as we continue. So before we jump into our documents, we of course need to know what our DBQ is that we're going to be answering today. So our DBQ today is, why was Buddhism able to spread after the fall of the Han Dynasty? Simple. So go ahead and pause your video at this time. On your worksheet, choose which annotations you think best fit to clarify the question, and then we'll see how you did. All right, so the annotations that you should have selected should be these. Why is asking the reasons or because. Buddhism, we know, is a monotheistic religion that's founded in India and spreads across Asia. Spread, of course, meaning move from place to place. And fall of the Han, the end of the centralized government in the Han Dynasty in China. So let's go ahead and take a look at document A. This text is called Disposing of Error. This is written by Musi in 465 CE. He was originally a Confucian scholar. So again, if you're not super familiar with Confucianism at this point, go back to your text from the Do Now and review those tenets of Confucianism, right? But he began to study Buddhism after the fall of the Han Dynasty, and in this excerpt that we're about to read, he responds to critics of Buddhism. When asked, why should a Chinese man allow himself to be influenced by Indian ways, I respond, China is under the center of heaven. According to the Buddhist scriptures, above, below, and all around, all beings containing blood belong to the Buddha clan. Therefore, I regard these texts highly and study these scriptures. I study them to improve my knowledge and spirituality, not to replace it. Why should I reject Confucius? Gold and jade do not harm each other. Crystal and amber do not cheapen each other. So let's go ahead and unpack this a little bit. What Musi is saying is, China's not the center of the universe, right? We kind of have that vibe a lot in America. Like, we're not the center of the universe. Like, there's a lot of other working parts that need to be considered when you're thinking of different religions, right? So China's not the very center. And what the author is saying is that in the scriptures that are sacred to Buddhism, the Buddha says that all men belong to his clan or to his family or group of believers, right? He's also saying that Confucianism and Buddhism can exist together, right? He says that gold and jade do not harm each other, crystal and amber do not cheapen each other. These are examples of precious stones and precious metals, and they don't hurt one another, but they can live in harmony with one another, right? They're two very different things, but they don't cheapen the other by existing, is what he's saying. So go ahead and take this time, review document A, and make sure you can tie your central idea to our DBQ. Why was Buddhism able to spread after the fall of the Han? Right? Keep in mind what he's saying. It's a really welcoming religion, and it works well with other philosophies. right? It can live in harmony with these other belief systems. So go ahead and pause your video at this time and complete your central idea for document A. All right, so moving to document B, right? This is a statement of scholar Zhi Dun, written in 350 CE. He's an author and advisor of Chinese aristocrats, or the upper class in China, and government officials during a period when northern China was invaded by foreign tribes. The text says this: "Whosoever in China, in this era of human pleasures, serves the Buddha and correctly observes the commandments, who recites the Buddha scriptures, and who furthermore makes a vow to be reborn without ever abandoning his sincere intention, will at the end of his life, when his soul passes away, be miraculously transported. He will behold the Buddha and be enlightened in his spirit, and then he will enter nirvana. Nirvana, of course, being the end of desire or eternal peace." So something that's really noteworthy about this text is he's writing specifically to people in positions of power, right? He's talking to Chinese aristocrats, like really, really wealthy people, or government officials that have all the power at this time, right? But in the text itself, it says that anyone in China who practices Buddhism correctly can reach nirvana. So it doesn't matter if you're an upper class person or not. He's saying you can reach nirvana regardless. And the thing that Buddhism provides that they don't see in Confucianism is this concept of security in the afterlife, right? I want you to think of why the Chinese people at this point in their history are trying to find some form of security in the afterlife. Think about what's happening with their government system and how the people are feeling at this time when everything seems to be in chaos. I want you to also pay special attention to what the author considers to be correctly practicing Buddhism, right? Observing the commandments that are found in the scriptures, reciting or saying the scriptures, and vowing to be reborn, or like making a statement and declaring that you're going to be reborn and part of this religion, right? I want you to keep all of these elements in mind as you go through and review document B before you create your central idea. And again, your DBQ is at the bottom of the slide. It's why was Buddhism able to spread after the fall of the Han, right? Why do you think that is for document B? Is it because he's writing to wealthy people and those people are going to be setting the example where all the lower classes can follow? Or is it something else? So go ahead and take this time to pause the video and create your central idea. All right, so your final task on your worksheet before you move on to your exit ticket is going to be putting all this information together. You're going to be writing a short answer response, contextualizing the fall of the Han Dynasty. Remember, again, the Han Dynasty rules pretty successfully for about 450 years, and then everything starts to crumble. So try to remember what those reasons are that the dynasty starts to break down, right? And then you're going to write an assertion that identifies 2 ways that Buddhism was able to spread. I went ahead and listed a few of the ways that we saw today. You can use your own that you've found, but these are a couple that I wanted to include for you. Buddhism is a really welcoming practice, right? It enhances and complements Confucianism. Confucianism doesn't have all the answers, and Buddhism helps out to fill out those gaps. And it also can provide comfort in the afterlife. So you may use those reasons, you may use different ones, but at this point, feel free to pause the video and complete your worksheet and then move on to your exit ticket. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and I look forward to meeting with you all during our Zoom class.